that their actual birthdays, right? That guf hari kashrim atzmusis birthdays, and we know the idea of what the birth represents. We actually spoke about it at length on Shabbos, but the notion of birth is where the essence lies. The earth represents the body, really over the soul, and inside of the body, which is of course comes at birth. We said that. Remember, we spoke on Shabbos. Kind of an interesting thing that. The story about Rabbi Eliyahu Navi was supposed to come to a class with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, with his Chevra Kadisha in the Idra, right around town. If you recall on Shabbos, we spoke about this, and he didn't make it to the class. Why not? Right, he was busy saving Rabbi Hamanuna Saba. Right, so then the question was asked: why didn't he just go to both places? We find that he's at every bris, he's at every Pesach Seder. Eliyahu Hanavi doesn't have a problem getting around, so why didn't he go to both places? What did we say? Right, why was his body? Because a spark that comes out of him is only like a little ray of him, whereas if he comes into his actual goof, right, that shows that he brings his very essence to the table. And it was disrespectful to go to either of those two sages. He could have visited them both the way he visits everyone on Pesach and at a bris, but out of respect to these great sages, he felt that he should be there with his whole essence. And how does the whole essence express itself when he's in a goof? So we learn from this story and many other places that the body itself represents the essence, and therefore the fact that these two sages were born, their bodies on the same day, is sort of a sign, an indication of this extreme unification that they had. That their birthday comes out on Chai Elul. Page 116.
Which word is used for essence here? For his essence? Is this a mouse and atzmus and etzem?
Haguf hare kasher im atzmusa yisbarach. Okay, let's go on to Oz base. Hayachas bin sab lenechet. What's the connection between a grandfather and a grandson? So we know that it's kaful. It goes in two directions. On one hand, the grandson is makabel from the Saba. He's a receiver, right? And on the other hand, simultaneously, he's mashlimoso. He doesn't just receive from him; he also perfects him and completes him, right? That it's not really fulfilled in full what the grandfather is until the grandson brings his piece to the table. And we see this where it says, we say in davening every day, lo yamush, this Torah will not go away from zera zeracha, right? That the sign that you really have properly established Torah in your genealogy, in your family, is not just when you teach your son, but dafka that you have to teach your son's son. In fact, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah that you have to teach your son, it also goes on the grandson. Past there, not really, right? You don't have the same type of obligation to teach your great-grandson because you can't be sure that you've actually passed on the Torah properly unless just if your son has it. Because if it doesn't go past your son to your grandson, it's a sign that you yourself did not have it properly. In fact, we spoke about this morning when we spoke about the idea that Yaakov that redeemed Abraham, right? The fact that it went 2 generations, it was a sign not only for Yaakov's greatness, but already on Abraham's greatness. And so, as it says, the Torah machzeres alaksan yeshala, that if you do things properly, the Torah will sort of revisit its host, that the Torah will find itself in the family, the generations up to the grandson. So on one hand, we see that there is a sort of need for the hashpah to go 2 generations, which means that the grandson really receives something from his grandfather. Simultaneously, it says in the Mishnah, "Ateres zakenim b'nei banim," that the crown of the grandfather is their grandchildren. That they, in a certain sense, crown their grandchildren. As we said, they also show the greatness and the fullness and the completeness of the grandfather. So it goes 2 directions: receiver and mashpia, this grandson. So we're saying, Mikevin Sha'admar Zaken, since the Alter Rebbe associated himself as a yichus, as the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, move on Sheyesh Nametzlo Shnei Anyanim, he must have had both of these 2 directions of Mekabel and Hashpah. On one hand, he took the Atrus of the Baal Shem Tov. So we know that he was a Mekabel because the whole thing came from the Baal Shem Tov, and all he did was basically harness and fuse himself with what the Baal Shem Tov had. But also, and this is kind of the chiddush of the Sikha here, who is mashlim the Baal Shem Tov. It's enough of a controversy, what we said in the last few classes, that the Alter Rebbe was the singular Rebbe that mamash embodied the Baal Shem Tov. But he goes further, and he says he wasn't just the Baal Shem Tov, he completed the Baal Shem Tov. In other words, he was the Baal Shem Tov 2.0, 3.0. Right? That something happened to the Baal Shem Tov's own greatness when it lived in the Alter Rebbe. And what does this mean? Kavanas Torah Baal Shem Tov nishlemes al yidei Torah Chassidus Chabad. That really, what the Baal Shem Tov really meant was Chassidus Chabad. His ultimate intention of revealing his teachings was that it should reach to this state called Chassidus Chabad. It's similar to like sort of what we see by the Rambam. If you go to the Rambam's kever, right, it says, Mimoshe, Ve'ad Moshe, Lo Kam Kamoshe, there was no one like Moshe from the Moshe ben Maimon, all the way from the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, but it says something further there. It says that there was, Moshe basically had this, the Rambam had a dream, or I think maybe his father had a dream, and he was visited by Moshe Rabbeinu after the Rambam finished the Mishnah Torah. And what did he say to him? Moshe said, thank you, that's what I meant. Right? In other words, if you look at the Torah, it's a book of laws, but it doesn't show itself as a book of laws. It doesn't like show itself what it actually is. It was intended to be a book you could live by, a book of Shulchan Aruch, a laid table, right? So it even though Moshe taught that, and anything Rambam learned, he only learned from the Torah of Moshe, the Rambam completed Moshe in this sense, to the point that Moshe said, thank you, that's what I meant. The same thing is true with the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov is not Chabad Chassidus. It's its own revelation of what we call Chassidus Klali. But what the Rebbe is saying here is that the grandson completes the grandfather. His work of the Baal Shem Tov wasn't actually done yet. He intended to do something, and the problem was it can't all be done in one stage. Why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu write the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam? Because it's not how it works, right? His generation needed one thing, and as it showed itself and brought itself to its ultimate fruition, this is what I meant. And so it is with Chabad Hasidus. This is really what the Baal Shem Tov intended to do to begin with. It's just that it had to come out in stages. Yes.
Just two things. Number one, if we look at the historical timeline, that actually Rabbi Nachman was more of a direct descendant of the Baal Shem Tov, and we know this through timelines. That's number one. Number two, I always understood when the Baal Shem Tov came down that actually Chassidus is really a wellspring of Torah, but there's lots of branches of Chassidus which has its own pinimness in Torah from the Baal Shem Tov. So it's a bit difficult for me to understand how can we say that the Alter Rebbe like the Baal Shem Tov really really it's Chabad, the Alter Rebbe completed Chabad. Yet there are a lot of other Chassiduses. I'm sure if you take what is said there into other Chassidic groups, they'll bring their own shita and own arguments and own pushbacks on this opinion. So how does Rosh Hashiva?
Well, I can tell you. First of all, you missed the class yesterday, in which we explained that even more than Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush was the actual grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and we said not only was he the grandson, but we explained how he was like the pinnacle, ultimate grandson, because he was the son of the daughter of the Baal Shem Tov. We explained over there how that's basically, if you want to start bringing that out, that there was a greater physical relationship. We already said the greatest physical relationship you could have, and the Rebbe addressed that the Alter Rebbe, who knew that he was his grandson, he used to say, yeah, but he's only his physical grandson. I am his spiritual grandson. So the Alter Rebbe himself positioned himself as some kind of superior quality that didn't have to do with actual lineage. Right. It was because he wasn't actually related to the Baal Shem Tov in that way. And as we explained, again, we had 2 classes on this. I think you were moving house, but you have to go back and check it out. So the point is that it's because he took the panemius of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings more than any other. And how do we know? First of all, there's direct evidence from the Barditchever Rebbe, who he brought in a footnote here, who was the oldest of all the Talmidim of the Maggid, and like their superior, he said that we all ate from the chelent of the Maggid, but the Litvak ate from the thick parts. In other words, he took the essential teachings of the Maggid more than anyone else, and this is also evidenced by the fact that the Maggid told him to write the Shulchan Aruch, which essentially appointed him as the Rav of the entire congregation, and we explained how he came out washing the head of the Tara of the Maggid, which the Rebbe points out that was like a symbolic gesture, because that also happened on Yud Tes Kislev, which wound up also being the Yud Tes Kislev the same day that started Chabad Chassidus. So there's many ramazim and many ideas. But the truth is, you're right. Someone else could come along and say, well, I think my Rebbe has this position. And all I can tell you is that they would be arguing with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So let them do it. I'm not going to take that upon myself. In fact, anyone in this generation who's going to stand toe-to-toe with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, they're going to have to prove their credentials. In other words, who are you to have an opinion on these matters in the face of this man who changed the entire face of the world even 30 years after he passed away? So I'm just saying, you can have such opinions, but these people aren't writing sichas that are, filling the world with wisdom and in the same capacity, not even close. So in the days of the original, you had some heavy hitters, and you could say this one has this opinion, this one has this opinion. As it kind of settled down to our days, most of the Rebbes of our times took their hat off and basically recognized the greatness of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. For example, the great Rav Koenig, who was the Breslov Rav of Sfas. I met him many times. In fact, I used to see him almost every single day. He went to visit the Rebbe. He was brought to the Rebbe, and someone brought him to I don't know if it was Yechidus, I think it was maybe dollars. And when they introduced him to the Rebbe, they said, "This is the Breslov Rebbe of Sfas." And the Rebbe responded, said, "This is the Breslov Rebbe of Eretz Yisrael." So he said, no, of Sfas. And the Rebbe said, of Eretz Yisrael. Meaning to say the Rebbe was giving him much more credence than they were, right? That he was mamash the Rebbe of the whole situation. And yet, the story goes, when he came back, he talked to his Chassidim. First of all, he was flabbergasted to be in front of the mamash melech of the world, right? It's if this is the guy that you're saying, then, so this is their best tzaddik, according to the Rebbe, right? This is the tzaddik they had in our times, basically. He lived here. This, by the way, Tzfas is essentially the home of most of the Breslov Chassidim in the world. And this was the great Rebbe, right? So he taught, and again, I knew him. I was in his shul, I davened there many times. It's a story that was known on the streets. And he said when he went and saw the Rebbe, he finally understood what it says in Chassidus when it talks about standing before the Melech.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So again, let's say you might have someone from another Chassidic group, let's say the Rebbe of Breslov of today. He could argue but what happened 300 years ago. But the reality is he going to put his words against the Lubavitcher Rebbe's words when he himself saying he's the king, and he scared him to understand actually what it says when you read in Chassidus. What does it mean, a melech? So I'm just saying this is not small words. We wouldn't be saying these controversial things because we are rooting for the one team over another team. The Rebbe is trying to teach us something of import that we must know. For whatever reasons, it came out specifically in our generation, an overwhelming emphasis, which we do not find in any of the other Hasidic writings so much, about pointing to the identity of the Rebbe, and that he is the Baal Shem Tov, and sort of this central. It's always found. There was always this conversation was always kicking around in all the way back. They speak about. You can find even the Chasam Sofer speaks about that there was always a Rebbe in a generation. And it says in the times of the Arizal, everyone knew it was him. The concept is not new. It's just that the concept became, Likutei Sichos, Chelik Dalet. It's like this children's, like the beginner. We already start off by telling a person right away. You want to know what Chayelul is? Chayelul is the day of the two luminaries where this work of the Baal Shem Tov was completed by his continuation, his soul, continuation of the Alter Rebbe. And it is stirring words. I went into Tzanz on Yutes Kislev. I was young. I just came to Sfas. I was all excited. You could tell like a little young Lubavitcher. He's got a little bit too much hubris. So I went in. I saw I'm not going to mention any names here, but these people are not hidden characters. I walked up to the head Rav of Tzanz, and I said, "Good Yom Tov." It was Yutes Kislev, and he said to me, "What good Yom Tov? What good Yom Tov? It's the Maggid Yurtzeit." It's like he removed. He's not a dummy, right? He lives in Sfas, the head of the capital of Chabad Chassidus over here in Eretz Yisrael, arguably. Yeah, and it's like almost like he was serious all the way. He was like, "What are you talking about? This is a day of the Yurtzeit of the Mag. Did something else happen on this day? Like he knows what happened on this day. It's like it bothers people." Right. And as I said yesterday, the Rebbe's intention here is not to put anybody else down. It really isn't. And the Rebbe actually mentions this often when he brings this concept of Chas v'Shalom. He quotes all these tzaddikim and he brings their Torah in his Torah. It's all one Torah. He's just telling us the truth. There is a Mamish Rebbe, and it's the Alter Rebbe, and that's what happened. The Baal Shem Tov intended from the beginning that his Chassidus should develop itself into a certain form called Chabad, right? And that's what we're learning.
Do you think Rav Koenig, this big deal when he
The other thing Rav Koenig said
yeah.
is that he would tell, first of all, he married a Chabadnik, and he told all of his Talmidim, if you want to understand Likutei Moharan properly, you have to first go through the Tanya.
Yeah, 100%.
You heard that?
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
You have to go through Tanya.
Yeah, because why? Because essentially it's the Chabad. The Chabad is not just a fancy word. It's the seichel, the understanding of these teachings. Once you have it, swim in the Pardes. No one's telling you to only learn one thing. But if you want to understand what the Baal Shem Tov, the actual seichel, what is going on here? What is this genius philosophy? No one else put it on paper. That's what Chabad Chassidus is. It's the explanation of these matters. Once you have it, all the Hasidic teachings ring true in the same way. But they're not, you won't find it over there, the thesis of what is going on here.
Do you think Rav Koenig thought maybe Rebbe could have been Mashiach when he said Melech, king? Do you think was Rav Koenig maybe?
Let's not get into all kinds of conjectures. Okay, I was just telling you because you brought this up. Okay, so going on to Os base. So we're saying on one hand, obviously the Alter Rebbe received from his grandfather, but he also completed his grandfather. This is what we mean, that the intention of the Baal Shem Tov was ultimately to reach the teachings to a level called Chabad. Chassidus Chabad, Maile es a Chagas v'nehim, right? Chassidus Chabad, it elevates both the Chagas and the Nehim. What's the Chagas and Nehim? Chagas is Ches Gevur Tiferes. Nehim is Netzach Hod Yisod Malchus, which means that we're on page 116, third paragraph down. Which basically the other Hasidic branches, by the way, if they don't call themselves Chabad, what do they call themselves? They call themselves Chagas, by and large. What's that? You don't see too many Nehims, but you got Chagas. In other words, they actually pridefully call themselves. This is what we do. We're Chagas. What does Chagas mean? Chesed Gevur Tiferes. Why would you want to call yourself Chagas? Because the purpose of Avodas Hashem is to reach a shleimus in your Chesed Gevur Tiferes, in your love and fear of Hashem. There's nothing wrong with it. Chabad's philosophy is exactly the same, by the way. The only difference is there's something called the long short way and the short long way, right? And this is the sort of the Tanya begins in a certain sense with referencing this Gemara, that there's this idea of how do you actually get to the emotions. It's one thing to just stimulate the emotions, right? Which could be called the short long way. I could get excited, but then ultimately, if I'm going to hold that excitement and master the excitement so that it's really my excitement that I can call my own and not my Rebbe's because he's influencing me, right? Then it's going to be short-lived, because when you go by a Hasidic tish and you see a Rebbe and you see a holy man, he's telling you holy words, it's exciting. And therefore being around the Rebbe is itself an inyan of Chagas. It's true. It's fire. The only thing is what happens when you leave the Rebbe, right? He didn't put himself on Inav Sheksavis Yahavis. He did not put himself into a book. He kept himself into the holy person. If you put himself into a book, that means even when the Rebbe goes away, you can go and find him in the book, right? And therefore, it's called Chabad Chassidus, not because it's trying to focus on the mind. It's also trying to focus on the Chagas. It's just trying to tell you that there's a long, short way. If you will focus on the Chabad, then you will be able to generate those feelings of love and fear anytime you want. Open up Likutei Torah, and better yet, memorize Likutei Torah. You'll have it in your own self, and those emotions of love and fear, you'll actually possess them. You'll actually own them. Someone was just telling me today. Someone came in, he said, I'm trying to work. Baruch Hashem, you guys are an amazing group of guys here. And one of you was trying to help another one of you. And he said, I'm working with this guy, and I'm like teaching him Chassidus. I'm trying to inspire him. But it's not really, I feel like I'm not inspiring him. So I said, let him read it to you, right? You can't only get so far by being mashpia on another person. When you leave, the hashpah goes away. They're back where they were. If they develop the ability to inspire themselves, it lasts forever. So this is the idea that the Chabad, it elevates the Chagas and the Nehim, also the lower faculties of action and so forth. Noam, did you want to ask something? Chagas is Chesed Gevur Tiferes?
Yeah, how is Tiferet Asana?
It's not. It's
I'm asking the rabbi.
it's chagat. I'm just saying chagas because I'm Ashkenazi. It's a saf, not a samech. Okay, going on. So Chassidus Chabad, it elevates these v'kemavur makom acher, as it's explained elsewhere. Chassidus Chabad pa'ala, what was its effect? Shafilu anashim pshutim, even simple people. Sheluchora einam shaychim lahavana b'asaga, which seemingly you wouldn't consider these guys big brains, right? Who learned Chassidus? Who was like brought in to the secret society of Kabbalah and even Chassidus in the early days? Were the Talmidei Chachamim, the people who like knew all of Shas and Poskim. So therefore, they were sort of shaykh to being let in onto the deeper mysteries yet. What the Alter Rebbe did was somehow take those deep mysteries and explain them into a language that anybody can understand. And that's what it affected that seemingly you don't have to have such a deep brain and be such a high level person. Gam hem yucholin lis'alus al yedei Chassidus Chabad. Even them, even us, right, can be elevated through Chassidus Chabad because it crawls into what we call the seichel anushe. It's explained in human language. If you go back and try and look in the Kisvei Arizal, we have a few guys here, dipping into the real pardes of the Kisvei Arizal. You'll see over there that it's gematrias and it's sort of like transformations of letters, and it's take you down some kind of like a trail of, you can sort of follow along at best, but to like sort of say that you sort of got your head around this and like it automatically like rings true in some kind of a meaningful way in your life. No, it's not, it doesn't really work like that. It's not intended to work like that. It's lofty thoughts for lofty souls. And should you have such a lofty soul, which is so sensitive and delicate and gentle to perceive godliness on that level, it lights you up. But if not, you're kind of blocked from it. Comes Chassidus Chabad, he put a Rebbe, which is the infinite light of God, into a book that actually makes sense. Right? And it lifts a person up to the Darga, right, of Chassidus. The Darga Nailis Yosem Asher Agdei Torah's Chassidus Klaus. And by the way, higher, he says here, than the general Chassidus that was available before Chabad. Because what was the general Chassidus? It didn't reveal all the secrets. It didn't put the Chabad on the page. It put the Chagas on the page. When you read all the Chassidim, including Rabbi Nachman, it's also called Chagas Chassidus. When you read any of these Rebbes, it totally blows you away. It's very exciting, right? It's rings true and lights up your soul 100%. But the point is, it doesn't explain itself. It just says words which carry you to a place of realizing your sudden interest in wanting to serve Hashem. It speaks to the heart, but it doesn't put the philosophy that those words were based on the page. The Rebbe has that philosophy, and the extension of that philosophy comes out as these burning words of burning coals. But what the Rebbe's philosophy was that got him there, he kept that inside himself. The Chabad Chassidus put the thoughts of the Rebbe on the page, so that you can bring yourself to those places.
I always say that Chabad explains things, but Veslov never explains anything. Really,
that's exactly right.
That's my experience.
And the idea of the Baal Shem Tov, who was certainly there to inspire and elevate and make us be fiery Jews, and he didn't explain things either. It's only because there's stages, right? There's stages. You can't explain everything at one shot. First thing he did was lay on a generation and even two generations of just lifting up and saving the life. It came to his ultimate intention, however, was that it should be explained. And that's what we're saying. The Alter Rebbe was not a branch of the Hasidic dynasty. He was the Hasidic dynasty. The intention of the Baal Shem Tov was eventually to do this, and then he did it in the body of the Alter Rebbe.
Mainstream. Makes sense.
Milvad zo sha'ad marazakin. Besides the fact that the Alter Rebbe and those who followed him, the Nasim of Chabad after him, Gilu, Horidu, Vahilbishu, they revealed, brought down, and encloaked the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov into the Seichel of Kedusha, as we just went on and on to explain. They brought it into intelligence. So they brought down the divine intellect so much that even the human intellect could cloak it. Yeah. Nosef lakach. In addition, bezos hempalu gam shleimus b'Torah Baal Shem Tov. In doing so, they did. It's not just that. Oh, look what they did. they made it understandable. In doing so, they completed the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. Because what's really going on here? And I know we're out of time, but since essentially what we're saying is that the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, it didn't explain itself, and one of the reasons it didn't explain itself is because it's talking about a divine wisdom which is somewhat unexplainable. Just the rays that come out of that divine wisdom can excite us, but the wisdom itself is essentially unexplainable. That's why the Baal Shem didn't himself put it on the page. So the fact that you're going to then explain the unexplainable, that's not just that's not just bringing out the Baal Shem Tov's level. If you must be going higher than the state of the Baal Shem Tov. If you're going to bring that which cannot be explained into a form of explanation, you can't just reveal that which the Baal Shem Tov had. You have to go to a place which is able to cloak that which cannot be cloaked. And that reaches to some kind of an essential place. And that's what you're looking at when you see Chabad Chassidus. You're not looking at just the Baal Shem Tov. We're looking at something which is far beyond what the Baal Shem Tov was holding on to, because it can cloak that which was uncloakable. And that's what we mean that he completed the Baal Shem Tov. It doesn't just mean he continued the work of the Baal Shem Tov. It means what the Baal Shem Tov wished one day he could do was finally able to be accomplished by some higher new neshama that came into the world and actually could accomplish that which cannot be done. Just like a grandson can pull off things with the koach of his grandfather. He's not taking credit for this himself. All he's doing on one level is just carrying the torch. But the reality is the torch that he's carrying is of a far superior level than the torch he was given. And in order to do this cloaking of the uncloakable, you need an infinitely high koach. But al yidav, and through this infinitely high koach, you can actually bring down that which is superior to the human intellect. And that's called bringing the Baal Shem Tov to shleimus, to completion. Till next time, my friends.
So now I understand why they say
in a fabrik. Fabrik. Ay, 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 ay. Fabrik. Laat me naar de fabrieken. Laat me naar de fabrieken. Fabrik. Oh, iedere fabrik. Met de gevre fabrik. Oh, iedere fabrik. Met de gevre fabrik. Dat is nice. De Rebbe doet, de Gevers en hem doet, jeder doet. Oké, laat me verbrengen. Verbrengen met de Gevre, verbrengen met de Rebbe. Avade in Avade is der Eibischte doel. Verbrengen met de Gevre, verbrengen met de Rebbe. Avade in Avade is der Eibischte doel. Avade. Yisroel en wei oi reiso, bekitcho berichi chadi. Yisroel en wei oi reiso, bekitcho berichi. Yisroel en wei oi reiso, bekitcho berichi chadi. Yisroel en wei oi reiso, bekitcho berichi. Fabrik, oh iedelijk fabrik. Oh iedelijk fabrik. Oh iedelijk fabrik. Oh iedelijk fabrik. Fabringen met de Gevre, fabringen met de Rebbe. Avade in Avade is de Eibischte doel. Fabringen met de Gevre, fabringen met de Rebbe. Avade in Avade is de Eibischte doel. Yisroel en wei oi reiso, bekitcho berichi chadi. Yisroel en wei oi reiso, bekitcho berichi. Yisroel en wei oi reiso, bekitcho berichi.